Good morning. Can you hear me? Great. Keep talking.
Talk about what you had for breakfast.
Lovely Marriott breakfast. Can't go wrong.
Okay. How's that? Good?
Yeah, you sound good.
All right. Let's
Are
get
you
going.
saying I don't sound good?
Only one of us sound good. All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Edward Wu, and this is Samir Rathod. I work at Microsoft. Samir works at one of our key partners, Workday, and he'll give a demo at the very end. So it'll be a very cool demo to show you how some of the Graph API work has been integrated with someone else other than someone at Microsoft, always using our own stuff. So that's always a good proof point. So I'm going to go into a little bit about Azure Active Directory, and then I'm going to talk about the Graph API, of course, doing a quick intro to it. Then I'm going to talk about authentication and authorization, and then show you how to do some of the reads and the writes, and then something called differential query, and then Samir is going to do a quick demo. I've taken out a lot of the slides, replaced them with more demos, so I'm sure you've all seen too many slides already this week. So and if I see a slide that I can say, you know what, I can just show this in a demo better, I'm just going to skip to it, because I think that's the real kind of emphasis. And one thing I should note, I'm going to start very easy, show you how to make calls to the API very easily, go a little bit harder, and then finally show you code where you actually execute it. But I want to make one point, is everybody in this room should be able to make a Graph API call on the easy step. If you can open up a browser, you can call the API. So I'm going to show you just how quick and easy that is. You don't even have to have your own company, because you can use our demo company. It's all set up. So first, a word from our sponsor. I wanted to talk about the phenomenal growth that Azure Active Directory has had. Very impressive growth. And I should make a caveat. This information is already a little bit old, so the numbers are even better if you look at our projected growth rates and continued climb. The millions of companies we have, you see here, the number of active tenants, approaching 146 million directory users, 16 million active users last week. And again, that's a little bit old because that was about 4 weeks ago. And in the past 3 months, roughly 25,000 new users have logged on. Now, what's spurring this growth? Very simply, solutions. Office 365, Intune, Dynamics CRM. Office 365 is the big one, right? Because it's already been shipped for 2.5 years. So that's the big player. But this should spell for anybody that's developing applications an opportunity. So if you're developing applications for your own organization in-house, great. This API is perfect for you. If you're a developer who wants to build a solution and offer it to some of these customers, then this is a great API for you to develop on. And by the way, this API is also being used within Microsoft. So SharePoint Online, Yammer, Exchange, etc., can leverage the same API, and they already are. So this is the same API set that our own internal teams are using as the public one. So that's the one motto and one of the key tenets that we had to say is, I don't want to have separate APIs for internal Microsoft and external. Let's just make one. It's easy for us to engineer, manage, maintain, do sustained engineering on, and that's going to be the continued model that we always have. And also, Active Directory on-premise is very successful. You can see the numbers there in terms of the number of companies that have adopted both in the US and internationally, and the number of millions of active users on Active Directory. So, and these two directories have a very tight relationship, the on-premise one and the cloud. And more of these customers that are running on-premise Active Directory are already planning how they're going to get their directory into the cloud. So the numbers, like I said, are going to continue to grow, and we don't see anything but continued progression in this direction. And some, as you know, some segments of the industry and some segments, some customer size are going to be faster than others, but eventually we believe the majority is going to be out in the cloud as well. So Graph API scenarios. So calling the Graph API really isn't a solution. you know how to build solutions. I'm really just providing a piece of the solution. Now, calling a directory, just like when I build an application from on-premise, you don't really sell a solution that calls a directory, really. I mean, most people build some solution. The plumbing to call the directory, yes, that's a key component of it. So, what are some of those things that you can build into your application? I just came up and brainstormed with my team some of the key ones, and we've seen these also already being used. People pickers, being able to search and list groups. By the way, how many have actually written their own people picker before, either LDAP or anything else? Anybody? Okay, one. So I tried it, and I realized how difficult it is to write a good people picker. It's not that easy. But that also forced us to think about, hey, our API doesn't have some things to make a good people picker. So we have that kind of continued evolution of making the API better by us ourselves trying to write applications and solutions on top of it. Workflows. You'll see in our directory we have relationships, managers, direct reports, members, and those are represented as links. So that's an important concept, and that certainly can be tapped through the API. Looking at authorization decisions based on security group membership, role membership, those are things you can do. Something unique in the cloud, if for some reason you need to find out what licenses the tenant has, or what license has been assigned to a user, you can make these calls and query for that information. For example, maybe you have a solution that's very tightly associated with SharePoint or Exchange, and it doesn't make sense to apply that solution to someone who doesn't use those services in the cloud. Well, by querying the licenses, you can very quickly determine, okay, who should really use my solution or not. Also, requesting change data. I'll save that at the end. I got a good demo. Show you how, instead of querying for users each time, I can ask for only change data since I last did my request. Important concept. And then writing. I can update users, groups. I can assign licenses. I didn't put that on there, but that is one of the options. I can actually do license assignment. Resetting users' passwords. Adding users to groups and security and roles. All part of the different scenarios that are supported. So Graph API, taking one more step back, it is a REST-based interface. We had a lot of choices. We had SOAP-based solutions. We had other solutions that we could look at. And there's another API that we had just internally that was web-based, SOAP-based. But we looked and we got feedback, and this is really the way the industry is going, the way a lot of the developers are thinking is in terms of their solutions. So that's why we chose REST. So programmatic access, it is tenant-specific. Remember, Azure Active Directory is multi-tenanted. So each one of our customers has their own tenant. So the access is scoped at the tenant level. You'll see that in the query format. I mentioned the relationships. And these are standard HTTP posts. Very, very simple. Get, post, patch, delete. And I'll show you how you can execute those very easily through some of our tools. Response. In JavaScript object notation, if you choose XML, you can also request that. Standard HTTP status codes, so you know what the responses are. Compatible with OData v3. OData v3 gives you HTTP query-like parameters, so I can do customized filtering on the data that's being returned. And we've standardized and used OAuth 2 for authentication. Vittorio Bertucci gave a brief talk about OAuth 2, and I'll show you how you actually can use that. And again, these are standards well known in the industry, and the code, there's lots and lots of libraries and code for these type of things out there. So that's another reason why we chose the design of our API in this way. So let me take a quick step back and compare the two for just a moment, what the relationship is. So on the left is the on-premises Active Directory, which everyone knows about. On the right is Azure Active Directory, where people such as Office 365, Dynamics, Intune, they have their tenancy. Also, by the way, I can get an Azure subscription and get a tenant right off the bat. I don't have to use those other services, so that's also an option. It is multi-tenanted. Within each tenant, there are entity types, such as users, groups, contacts, roles. And there's the relationships within. Now, over here on the left, very mature Active Directory environment. It's been around, lots and lots of solutions for administration, UI, scripting, PowerShell, lots of wealth of stuff out there. Everybody knows that. When we went to the cloud, we wanted to give as much of those same capabilities in the cloud. So yes, we have an admin portal. Actually, we have the ones traditionally used by Microsoft Online users, Office 365, Azure Active Directory portal also connects to it. We also have PowerShell and can also connect to it. Directory sync. So getting your on-premises directory into the cloud needed a very quick way to get you synchronized and up into the cloud. And Jono, Luke, has a session this afternoon. What time is that at, Jono? Is it 2:30? Okay. He's going to talk a lot more in detail about directory sync and also some very new capabilities about how passwords actually can be actually retrieved and pushed into the cloud. So please attend the session if you want to get a drill down onto the directory sync piece. Again, applications, very mature, lots of them already know how to talk to on-premises through LDAP, Kerberos for authentication. So we needed to take the application portion and push that paradigm into the cloud. So what we introduced is a REST interface here. We have a Graph API that sits in front of it, at front ends the interface. And so we standardized on REST and OAuth, analogous to LDAP and Kerberos on-premises for the cloud. And there's no reason why these applications have to be separate boxes. You could have an application that talks to on-premise and in the cloud as well. And just a very subtle point I wanted to point out is notice how I put Graph API here and the REST interface here. And that was by purpose. Today, this is going to be a key one that you call the Graph API, which is to get to our directory. But imagine the day that there's going to be down here on the far right other services that you'll come in through the Graph API to access. And you can kind of continue the model. There's also relationships between the tenants here and the users here and potentially the data that's stored out here. So this sets the stage of how we're thinking about the graph and how it's going to extend further to different services. Okay, kind of the nuts and bolts of the query format. So I wanted to talk through this. So the URL, the graph URL-based part, the graph in white, graph.windows.net, that's going to stay the same always. No matter if you're in Europe, US, Asia, that's going to be the one that you're going to call. In green is the tenant. Remember I said it's a scoping by tenant. So this can be any verified domain that the tenant owns or the tenant's object ID. This is a GUID, a unique identifier. But verified domains are also a unique identifier. The blue is the entity type that you're going to call into. In this example, I'm just showing users. But as I mentioned previously, there's other entity types, groups, contacts, tenant details, etc. The API version specified here. So that's important because, and you see that our GA released version was released on April 5th of this year. So that's important because as long as you send in this API version, you have a contract with us. We're not going to break your client. And we'll continue to always support that up to a certain point. Eventually, we'll have new versions. We're going to release another version in, let's say, June sometime. And you have your opportunity to upgrade to that version as you see fit. You manage the time and the schedule when you're going to move. But as long as you're staying on this version, we'll always continue to work on that. Yeah, quick question.
So the fact that the API version string comes after the entity type suggests that you might version entity types?
Yeah, it's not only the entity types, but potentially all the methods as well within the API. So, for example, if this was groups and I had a new method to do group membership lookup, for transitive group, and that's actually a real one that we're going to introduce, then you would be able to, this version, by specifying the version, you could take advantage of those new methods. Now, of course, we're going to document everything, so you'll see, okay, I am on this version, and they introduced a bunch of stuff over here that's new. Nah, this is not interesting for me yet, so I'm going to wait. And then all of a sudden you see something, that version looks pretty good, so maybe it's time for me to upgrade to the next version. The OData piece is an optional piece. So this is, like I said, the HTTP-like query formats, and you can do things such as filter and top. And we don't support them all yet. It's on our roadmap. So for example, $sort or $select. Sort, of course, would give you a sorted order of this data. $select may say, don't bring me back all the user properties. Just show me their display name, first name, last name, and display, user principal name. So we don't support those yet, but it is on our roadmap to add more and more. Okay. Now, let me switch over to my demo. And I said to everyone, if you can open a browser, then you can call the Graph API. So let me show that to you. So if you go to graphexplorer.cloudapp.net, by the way, where do we host that? Anybody want to guess? Azure? Yeah, good guess. Everybody see cloudapp.net, that's where a lot of the URL namespaces are hosted directly on Azure. So here it is. It's a custom tool we made. Anybody play with the Facebook Graph Explorer? Facebook has one as well. Similar, you can query. I believe ours is a little bit more interesting because you can actually get to more information besides just yourself and a few of your users. You can actually get to the tenant information. So if you don't have a company, no worries. You just click on the Use Demo Company on the far right, and I will execute the query. And what comes back are the top-level references of the entity types. You can see them right here. And let's say I really want to go look at users. So I make that query. And down below, in the window below, is the JavaScript object notation format of each user. That's in this particular demo company, we have 28 users. So, and you can see some of the information coming back. And it's in a special format, and you can see some of the property types associated with this user. But if I wanted to actually see one user, I don't care about every user right now, then I can specify their UPN, user principal name, and now I've navigated to just this individual user's data, as you'll see here. The properties are in alphabetical order. So user principal, obviously, so the last one starts with U, and up here at the very top is account enabled. Their status is it's an enabled account. We also return metadata as well, basically the data about the data. But where you're really most interested in is actually the actual data that's coming back. Now, I mentioned relationships. So if this person had a manager, I should be able to do this and run the query. And return back to me should be this person, Derek, who's Adam's manager. Similarly, if I wanted to see if this person had any direct reports, you would have a list of users that would be returned that reported to Adam. I think in this particular case, he only has a couple of users reporting to him. So you notice that I didn't, and I should caveat a couple things. I noticed I didn't put the API version on here. Normally you would if you were actually writing code or trying to do this in some other method. And the reason is we just try to simplify things and obscured it away. We actually, underneath the cover, are using setting the API version. The other thing you noticed that I never showed anything about how I authenticated or was authorized to even make these calls. Again, done underneath the covers to just make this tool simple. It's an introductory tool to get you going to see what the queries look like and get the feel for them. So that was the purpose. I'm going to go into how you do the other pieces very shortly. But I wanted to show you this. And like I said, this is open. Anybody can go up here. And the other important thing about this tool, even while you're writing code, there's sometimes while you're writing code and you're troubleshooting and the query is not coming back correct, or you're getting this query is not supported. This is a great tool just to go simply check. Did I do anything wrong? Are my assumptions right? Just put your query in here and see if it works. Because a lot of times this will tell you exactly if there's something wrong with your query. So it's a great troubleshooting tool not only just for introductory purposes, but later on when you develop. Yes?
So is this URL hard-coded to that domain?
You mean to that tenant?
Yes.
Yeah, so no, it isn't. Let me go back. So it's when I clicked Use Demo Company, it pre-populated it. But let's say I have a real company here, and I wanted to go make that query. What's going to happen is when I do the get, it's going to say, oh, actually, it'll always bring the top level ones. So let's say I wanted to get users from this company. What it's going to do is it's going to come back and prompt you, yep, you want to call this tenant, but you got to prove to me you own it by giving me some application information, specifically an application ID and application secret, basically the credentials for the app. But it's not going to let you make that query until and the only person that could have entered in and configured this, which I'll get into in a moment, is someone who's an administrator in the company. So that's how that works. Okay. And then if you say, no, that's not what I wanted, I want to go back here. Okay. Now, authentication and authorization. Not my favorite topic, but in order to call the graph, I'm as mindful of security and controls as anybody. But it's basically your ticket to get to the party, to get to the graph. And I do have to make sure that I do it in the right way. So the current method that we support in terms of authorization is OAuth 2. And specifically, if you're familiar with, how many are familiar with OAuth 2 by chance? Okay, great. I think there's 4 primary methods. There's an implicit, a user credential, client credential, and authorization code. Okay, so the one that we currently support is the grant type client credential. Basically, it's an app ID and an app password. And I'm going to submit that here. And if everything checks out, we do this to our special Azure AD authentication endpoint, an OAuth endpoint that knows how to talk OAuth. It will issue back a token. And then I can go and have the fun I want, because I can just include this token in my authorization header and make as many calls as I want. Now, that does the authorization piece. Sorry, that does the authentication piece. There's one more check, which is authorization. Hey, I see that you're authenticated, but am I really allowed to read data out of this company? Or am I allowed to change data, right? Well, that's on our back end. We will do another check to say, hey, yes, you are. And then, of course, the data is processed and returned back. If not, we'll send an unauthorized response back to the client. So now, hold your question there just for a moment about where you get your client ID, where you get the client secret, and how do you do this authorization. Just hold on to that, because I'll show you that in a second. Okay, so again, sometimes when you're writing your application, I think it is very helpful to take a step back and say, okay, what is actually going over the wire? Because that helps you troubleshoot your code later on. So getting that token, it's a post operation, and this is our OAuth endpoint. You notice, that, again, similar to the graph endpoint, graph.windows.net, we have a common one, login.windows.net. Here's the tenant, OAuth 2, and then I can specify I want a token. And again, we also have an API version here as well, similar format and style for calling the OAuth endpoint. I specify in the header that is specific content type formatting. And here in the body is where where my credentials are shared. First of all, I have to spell out a few things. There's 4 things I need to spell out. Grant type is client credentials. The resource that I'm after, which is the graph.windows.net. And here is where you present your client ID and your client secret. And if all of those check out, you will be issued back a valid JSON web token, which I then include in the authorization header. And so when I make my user call, here's my authorization header. Now I truncated the token. It's actually a very long string GUID, but it's a bearer token, and I include that in the authorization header. And in every request from this point on, that's what I use. And here's another, I'm going to demo this in a second. Here's the accessing a specific user and a specific property. So let's actually go over to that demo. I'm going to use Fiddler. How many people have used Fiddler? Great, great. Fantastic tool. You can download it for free. All our developers, before we start coding, we always want to do Fiddler. A lot of times, even like we hear hey, there's a bug or something, we'll actually use Fiddler first just to validate if there really is something going on. Then we go over to our code. So it's a very good tool to have in your toolkit. So let me clear this all out because it was tracking a bunch of stuff. And by the way, it's also very good for over the wire while you're running your application. So if you're actually running your application and you turn fiddle art tracing on, you can see what's going over the wire. Okay, so I'm a very bad typist, so I'm going to bring back something that I saved previously. Okay, so let's make a post request to get a token. So here it is. This is just like what I showed earlier. Logon.windows.net at the post here. And also down here is where I specified the grant type, client credentials, the resource, my client ID and secret. It's wrapped over here to the right. Okay, so let's actually execute that and see what happens. So I got a response, and here it is. The response came back, and here is my token. My expires in, expires on, not before, the resource that I requested, and the type bearer. So those are in tick system time, so you could convert that to UTC or something human readable. But what I want to get is this token. So I'm going to copy that value, and let's actually do a request to the graph. So I'll bring back a query. So here it is. I'm going to make a call to get users. And this is an old token. That would fail. So I'm going to cut that out, and I'm going to do paste and bring back the token that I just acquired. I don't need that part. And you can specify bearer. And let's execute and see what happens. And I see that I got a 200 result. And between each and this is the result of the get user query. I got all my users. Each curly brace here represents one user object. So if I unclick this, expand it, you'll see that that's that first user. And so each one of these, there should be 28 of them total. So that's a fantastic way, and I constantly refer people to this tool because the very typical question, somebody will come up to me and say, I can't, something's broken, I'm not able to authenticate, I can't. And they're stuck on getting the token. And this customer of ours, he was actually doing development both in the US and India, and he was swearing to me that it worked in the US, but it didn't work in India. And I said, is it the exact same code? Are you sure it's the exact same code? And I said, well, let's prove to ourselves. He thought, hey, are you doing some IP blocking from India? I said, no, we don't do that. So I told him to go to Fiddler from India and have one of his testers execute this to get a token. And sure enough, it was failing. It was actually succeeding in Fiddler, but his code was failing. So, okay, I said, we know it's not a network issue because you can do it in Fiddler and you're using your client ID. So he debugged, and he finally figured it out that he was, when he was crafting the not before and expire time in the request of the token, he wasn't using UTC time correctly. And so he was actually requesting a token that's already expired. So that's where the failure came. So it was very, very easy to get to that problem. Again, using this tool, fantastic way to isolate it. And then after that, he was off to the races. He could start finishing his code. So, okay, one last query I wanted to show you, just to show just a variation of getting users. Let's see, is it this one? Let's go back. So I'll just drag it in here, and let's take a look at what I have in this query. It's for a particular user. Okay, I don't think it's that one. It's this, yeah, okay. Let's put in the token correctly, because this is, again, an old token. And by the way, this is what you'd get just to show you. Unauthorized. Old token. Won't work. Okay, so let's go back to new token, or the token that I just retrieved. Okay. I have to do the same trick. I didn't want to copy that portion, but that's okay. Now, I'm not going to put bearer in here, but you should put bearer in there. We have some, in our code, we accept it if you didn't put bearer. So, okay. So what I requested in this one is the thumbnail photo. So if I go look at the JSON returned and the image, actually, where's the image view? There it is. So I asked for the user, this Adam at GraphDIR1 on Microsoft, and I asked for a specific property for that user, which is his thumbnail photo. So we don't send down the thumbnail photo by default as the user object, because these are a little bit bigger size, and you may not want to overload your payload of getting that user object. So if your application did care about thumbnail photos, then you'd want to make a separate request like this. So, okay. Jump over back to here. So that's Fiddler. So here's my eye chart. This is not for you to read right now. This is just something you can download later if you download this PowerPoint. Just cut and paste out of here and push these into that Graph Explorer. You can see some of the sample queries and examples of the data that comes back. I try to give a wide range of different filtering capabilities because that's where it really gets interesting. And I'll just highlight one. This is a very powerful one. So maybe you don't know which user exactly has a proxy address. So you can actually do, because users can have multiple proxy addresses, correct? So I can come in here and say, hey, just show me who has these potential ones that starts with. And this will return a list of users with that exact query. So that's just an example of something you can do with the filtering. Okay, now I mentioned earlier client ID and secret and where do you get these things. Well, obviously I had to have configured that ahead of time somewhere, and also what permissions I wanted to give that app. Well, the place to do that, so let me take a step back. Up until a month ago, the place to do that was PowerShell. You would use your administrative credentials for your tenant and go run some PowerShell. Specifically, you would do something called create MSOL service principal. And then you would specify, and it would actually, if you don't specify it, it would generate a client ID and secret for you. And then you would have to add it to a role. Specifically, there's two big roles that we have, directory readers and directory writers. So if you could read or read and write. If you wanted full permissions, you could add that service principal to the global administrator role. So that was the preferred way up until about, like I said, a month and a half ago. Now the preferred way is to do it through the portal. And you want to do it through the portal for a variety of reasons. Number one, you don't have to run PowerShell. You don't have to install the PowerShell client and IDCRL, all those things. So that makes one step. But that's still not a big deal for most people. But the big deal, I think, is that once you register your app here, it becomes a real application within first of all, your tenant. But there's a switch here that says external access. Well, if I flip it to on, this allows your application to be consumed by those millions of tenants if they wanted to use your application, if you wanted to offer your application to them. Because once I switch it to on, and they give permission for your application to call the directory, guess what? Your service principal gets created underneath their tenant. And you know how to call their tenant because you have the client ID and the secret. And all you have to specify is their tenant domain. And all of a sudden, your application has become a multi-tenant application that can be used by all those millions of tenants and made available to them. So that's why you want to start here and do it this way. It creates the right template, if you will, for your application. And you may never, and if you're not building an application to be offered for others, still do it through here because it's the best way to do it. It's a lot easier. And there's sometimes you want to troubleshoot or do something outside. Yes, PowerShell is still available, but the preferred way is to do it through here, and that's the recommended way. And here is where you specify what permissions you want to give it. And the permissions are a little bit coarse right now. You give this app either read permissions or read and write. So the one caveat here is if you want to do deletes, then you will have to do something outside of the UI. Specifically, you have to give it either the user account administrator role or the global administrator role. So that's the one caveat. If you need to delete, then in the future we will have more roles here that will include delete, but we just haven't had time to update the UI just yet. Okay. So let me just jump over again, registering for an app. See if I'm still in my tenant. Okay, here's my Azure Active Directory tenant that I've signed up for. And I'm going to go look at applications. That applications tab is not going to be available. Here's the other portal. This is the portal that Office 365 users are most familiar with. There's no application tab. So you'll have to use the Azure administration portal to get to the application tab. Now, I've already done a lot of testing. I've got multiple apps here, but I'll just show you one of them. And here I'm doing localhost because I'm just doing testing on my local machine. And enable your app to read and write. Now, here's the first part of the code. The client ID is right here. That's a GUID that will just be randomly generated, provided to you. But here, configure key. This is where you configure your password. I've got already configured 2 of them here. You see that I can't see what the actual password is, and that's by design. So make sure after you do this configuration to safeguard and write down that password. And I've done it like everybody else. I put it in Notepad and I closed Notepad too fast and I didn't save it. So that's okay. I can create another key here. I say 1 year or 2 year. Let's just do a 1 year. And what happens is when I hit save down here, it'll actually create the key. And in a second, it'll show you the key value. You see that right there? So there's a nice button here. It says that allows me to be copied. So save that somewhere very safe, because when you come back to this UI, you won't see it again. You won't be able to read your password again. So, okay. So I showed the easy configuration there. There's some other things. Let's see. The logo and things like that. When you eventually decide to publish your app, there's a few other requirements, and that's how we have some documentation. What are those requirements? For example, your return URL will have to be HTTPS. You'll have to supply some information about your company, your logo, etc. Okay, that's the application configuration piece. And that's the URL to get to the Azure portal. If you don't have Azure, if you have MSDN, you can activate your Azure subscription, or you can sign up for a Azure subscription trial as well. So, okay, write operations. So just a quick show of hands. How many people are interested in actually writing to the directory, by chance? Okay, that's about right. So that's, if you see most applications in directory or associated with directories, 80, 90% are read only, right? So, but there's going to be the 20%, 10% that need to do the write operation. So, the typical scenarios, again, user provisioning, group management, user password reset. There are some objects that are read only. You won't be able to do any edits on them. For example, roles, because those are the canned system roles that are in our system. Only our back-end engineers can configure those and make more available. Now, in the future, we may have some roles that you can actually customize. As a matter of fact, that is on our roadmap. But right now, those are only roles that are read-only. Subscriptions. Right now, that's managed and authoritatively controlled by the commerce system. So you can read them all day long, but you won't be able to change the subscriptions. You can assign subscriptions to users, but the subscription objects themselves are read-only. And I should also make a note. Generally, when you do read, they're usually get operations. So there's one caveat to that, is the transitive group lookup. So there's a method called isMemberOf. Basically, if you want to find out if a user is a member of a specific group, You specify the group and specify the user, and it'll come back true or false. That operation is not a get operation. It's actually a post operation. However, you're not actually posting anything. You're not changing any data. But however, we did have to implement it as a post operation versus a get. I won't get into details right here, but there's some nuances that forced us down that path. But you should just make a note of that. So user creation. Here's an example of how I actually create a brand new user in the system. It's a post operation. Here's, again, the common format. This is the user's entity that I'm doing. And here's what the body would look like. And again, my authorization header as well. Here's what my body of the post looks like. And these 5 properties are the minimum properties to create a user in our system. You can have more, but these are the minimum that you are required. I have to specify whether the account is going to be enabled, the user principal name, the display name, the password, the initial password that I have to set, and a mail nickname. That's it. If I do a post on this, this user will get created. Yeah.
That's the minimum that this API enforces, right?
That's the minimum our system enforces on the back end. So
I have open cases with Thursday where I have users that have been created less than that.
Less than that? Okay. Okay.
So I disagree with you. But.
Okay. Well, let's have a talk. We can have a conversation because if you've got some trick up your sleeve, I'd love to hear it, or how we can do it less than these. Okay. Add a user to a group. Notice just a very small nuance here. I've specified the group. It's the object ID of the group, the GUID of the group. And I added as a link, and here's the link. And it's this particular, you can specify users or directory objects. And this is the GUID of the actual user that I'm actually adding to this group. Resetting a user's password. This is a very simple one. I've specified the actual user I want to go take action on, this method on, and I set it this way. I specified the new password, and also I have to specify whether this user is going to be forced to change their password when they log on next. So in this case, they're good to go. They're not going to have to change it again. I've set this to false in this example. Okay, so now I'm going to go a little bit deeper into some of the code. Okay, so I should tell you that we have a lot of sample code. We have sample code in C#. We have sample code in PHP and Java. There's other languages going to become supported as well. So I've implemented this. It's a C#, and I've done it purposely. I've just done this in a console app. Just so that you can kind of see the queries and the responses. Just some quick navigation. This is the console app itself, and I've added the references for the WCF data services client. This is what you see here in terms of these libraries. We also have this helper class, Microsoft Windows Azure Active Directory Graph, and in here is the actual project that's part of this. In here are some things such as helping you get the token, so you don't have to write all that code, constructing the graph service instance, which includes the authorization header, so that's included in this library as well. So it's just, and this is available for download, and as part of either those sample apps or as a standalone entity, so you can just include it in your project. So it makes life a little bit easier. Now, in the future, we're going to have a library that just does authentication and getting tokens. We haven't. It's in a preview mode right now. It's called the Azure Authentication Library. The name may change, AAL, Azure Authentication Library. But if you do a search for that, you'll see that there's a preview of that. But when it's finally released, we'll re-release these samples with AAL as part of this package. So, okay, let's see what I have in this code. So I'm going to move this aside a little bit so I can get maximum viewing. So it's very, very simple. I didn't even put this in a web config. I hard-coded it in the main part of the body of the code. I'm specifying here a tenant, an app principal, and a password. I've pre-configured this in the portal. And you'll see that the graph service instance is also specified here, graphwindows.net, and I'll specify the tenant name. So this code, let's just walk through it. The first thing it's going to do is get a token. So I'm going to run and debug. get that. Okay, I want to go right to there. Execute. Let's see if I get a token. Okay, I should have a token now. There it is. There's my token. See, the access token is the piece that I really want. And similar to how we saw this in I think, Fiddler, we have the other property values there. So the token's in hand. Now I'm going to call the instantiate a new directory data service. And I'm going to pass in the tenant name and the token that I just acquired. And I should be good to go at this point to start making all kinds of queries to get users, groups, contacts, roles, anything in this tenant's directory. So let's just step through this. I'm going to execute. I got hopefully a user list of some type here. Actually, I need to go one down. Okay, so let's see how many users did I actually acquire. Okay, 28 users in my company. I just pumped out the value. And now this is very boring. It's just going to write out the display name and the user principal name of each user, one after the other. So I'm not going to bore you on that, so I'm going to go execute the next code. Now let's go see how many groups I have in this company. Okay, how many groups do I have? Only 14 groups. I got 14 groups here. And same kind of thing. I'm going to iterate through each group. I'm going to display the display name of the group, and if it has an email address, I'm going to display it as well. So there it started to do it. I'm not going to go through each one. Now I'm going to this was for demonstration purposes. I'm going to come down to the next section of code. Okay, so you've acquired that token, so that's important, but you've cached it away somewhere, and you're going to be using that token. But every once in a while, you're going to have some common code that checks if that token is still valid, if it's not expired. Well, in that helper class, we have something that lets you do that very quickly. So we will actually go ahead and call the methods to see if the token is either expired or will expire in 2 minutes. Okay, the token it's good for several hours, so it passed over that. It didn't have to acquire a new token. Now, one thing we should do is put that code down further into the token helper, so you don't even have to worry about that. We'll go get the token for you next time. But I explicitly called it out just to show that you do have to think about these things as you're writing your code. So now, the next section is creating a new user. So this is the post operation. So there again, I have account enabled. This is the display name of the user, the UPN, the mail nickname, and the password. And I'm not going to require this user to change their password on first logon. And I call the graph service add user method. And I have a very quick try catch block. And there it says that I created this new user. It should have successfully created. So let's go see if that really happened. Go over here to the portal. Refresh. There he is. There's the new user. Okay? Good. I'm going to delete that user because I'm going to reuse that code in a second. Okay. Great. Yeah. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. How many? No, there aren't. You only limit, no group or limit. I mean, ultimately, I think there is a limit that we have. I don't know what the 50. Yeah. Okay. Okay, real quick, differential query. So if you're going to build an app and you're not going to laboriously call and process users each and every time, we introduce something called differential query. So this is for applications that do only want to know about changes happened since the last time they did a query. So very, very helpful, especially if you're thinking about potentially bringing down some of the data and having it locally cached and used in your application. You just want to now, after that initial query, just constantly just only look for changes. So it is an extension to the graph. It's built on top of it. It's a very similar query response, same metadata. So in the bottom line is it's change-based. I'm only looking for changes. Not only new users, deleted users, but even if I change a user's property, I should see a reflection when I go to the query and only get those delta changes. Okay? Query format is very similar to the one that you saw earlier. I can not only can I specify users groups, but I can specify a more generic type called directory objects that includes users groups and contacts. So that may save also some coding because I can say directory objects versus the entity type. And here's the key one in gold color. Here, delta link. Delta link is where you specify how to do it. So let's go back to this one and say delta link equals. So the first call is going to be just like any other call. It's going to do a full get of all the users. And it should bring back all the users, as I would expect. But notice something new that's introduced here, and this is this delta link. Because what I'm going to use that delta link for is I want to query again now. Now what should happen is it should only bring back anything that's changed since I did that last query. So I haven't done anything in that directory. I didn't add any users. I didn't delete any users. So nothing comes back, right? So as expected. Now let me go back. Remember I created that user when I ran this code? And let's actually run it again. And I deleted that user, I believe. So now I created the user again, right? There he is. So I'm going to go to delta link and see what it reports to me. I do a delta link get. And now it shows up. That user, it reports to me, was created, right? Very easy. Now, go back up here. Refresh my view. Delete this user. Okay, now go back here. Do delta link. Okay, now it comes back and it reports to me that this user is deleted. So now you saw the change happen twice. Okay, so that's the differential query. Very powerful tool. We have a sample app that actually shows you this as well. Now I've got some other things interesting about this, but talk to me afterwards if you want to be on a preview of some other things we're thinking about this. But now I'd like to jump over and let Samir do his demo. So,
And I've got a question on
yeah.
So on that directory of objects,
Yeah.
Is that hard-coded to just those 3 object types, or could it possibly include future object types like devices?
Yeah, it should do all future all supported object types,
Great,
looking
thank
for changes. Yes, that's key. Oh. Oh, yeah, sorry. Let's go to PowerPoint. Okay. Forward. Okay, Samir, all yours.
All right, so anybody in here who's heard of or uses Workday? A couple of people? Okay, great. So for those of you who don't know who Workday is, that's okay. We'll give you a quick preview of what Workday is, then we'll jump into a quick demo. So we call ourselves the enterprise cloud for HR and finance. So what Gartner dubs administrative ERP. That's the market that we play in. And we were founded we started from scratch using a clean sheet of paper. So I'm not sure if anybody's read up on Workday. We were founded by industry veterans Dave Duffield and Neil Bushry. Dave was the former founder of PeopleSoft and Integral Systems before then, or before that. And Neil was vice chairman of the board. After the somewhat hostile takeover of PeopleSoft by Oracle, they decided to start anew and build a new company from scratch. They took this as a great opportunity. If you think of most HR systems out there in the marketplace and ERP systems in the marketplace, they were all built in the 70s or 80s, and they've evolved since then, but the architecture is largely unchanged. David and Neil saw the disruption that was going on in the cloud, the very early beginnings of this, and said, let's build this new company and start from scratch, learn from kind of the sins of the past, and build a cloud-based company. And that's what we've done. We're now publicly traded, went public last year, and very rapidly growing. So what do we do? And I'll just go ahead and build out the slide. We have a suite of applications that, again, Gartner dubs administrative ERP, that are all running in the cloud. All the way from, HR is our core competency, and it's where we started, but we've since evolved into financials, to time tracking, to payroll, procurement, expense reports, et cetera. We're built on a very adaptive foundation, and I think that our secret sauce is really going to be our technology. Number one, we're multi-tenant SaaS. Number two, we're in memory applications, so all objects reside in memory in Workday. We have a very robust integration platform that I'm going to demonstrate to you today, and a robust security model. And the embedded services, you'll see some of this today, but we're an event-driven application. So essentially, when a business event occurs in Workday, we can trigger off a series of events. We can say, all right, now that we've completed step A, let's go to step B, step C, step D, et cetera, until the process is complete. So essentially, everything in Workday that you do, from hiring an employee to changing a job to even adding a photo of yourself in the application, kicks off a business event in the Workday application. So very, very configurable framework there. I won't bore you with the other things. They're not relevant for our discussion today. But some things about Workday that why customers choose Workday. We've got a very consumer-driven UI. We're fully mobile enabled, so our Windows mobile application is going to be released in July. Today we support the other devices out there. I saw lots of cool Windows phones today as I was walking through the conference. And that's a little bit about the company. Just give you a sampling of the types of organizations that leverage Workday. And I should point out, every single one of these customers is using us as their core system of record. In multiple industries. So we've got companies like Yahoo, companies like HP, Lenovo, many in education and government. So lots and lots of customers across multiple industries that are leveraging Workday. About 450 customers and growing very rapidly. So just a fraction of Microsoft's customers, but we think we'll start catching up very quickly with our rapid growth. So with that, I want to jump into the demo. And what I'm going to do is hit 8.
Yep.
Here, there we go. So, Ed just showed you the Azure console. So I've got 3 users here in my directory, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into Workday, and I'm going to hire somebody and essentially kick off an integration to feed this data to AD. What I want to first show you is I've logged into Workday in several different browsers here. What I want to first show you is the business process framework, that event-driven framework that Workday is built upon. If I click on, first thing we'll do is we will hire somebody into the IT help desk. If I click on this business process here, you'll see the series of steps that are going to be kicked off whenever I hire somebody into the IT help desk department. So you can have as many copies of this hire process for your organization as you need. And in this case, I've said just for IT, I want this workflow to fire in this order. So essentially, what's going to happen is the first step is when I hire somebody, we're going to kick off a proposed compensation step. So that's actually another workflow, another business process that will be kicking off. And when that business process is complete, we're going to do the next step, which is configure and create a Workday account. Remember, Workday is your HR system of record, so this is where you're going to hire and fire employees. Hopefully not fire, but hire and terminate your employees. The next step is we're going to provision them to a group. You set up your groups in the Workday application, and then the next step after that is feed that information to Azure. So let's see this in action. And by the way, you can also view this graphically if you're a visual person with swim lanes, looking at who's approving and what steps are occurring. So let's go ahead and let's hire somebody. I'm going to go back and just pull up my IT help desk organization. And I'm going to view this graphically in an org chart, and you'll see that I have a couple of different open positions. So I'm going to go ahead and hire somebody into senior IT analyst. Take an action here and say hire employee. And I'll create a new applicant. We can source these from an applicant tracking system. Most organizations have a recruiting system of some source, but in this case, or of some sort, in this case, we'll just hire somebody manually. And Edward, we're gonna hire you today. And just give you a work email address. The more I fill out here, the more that can be passed over to AD, obviously. But in the interest of time, I'm not going to fill in a bunch of information. We'll say this is effective yesterday, and we're just filling a vacancy. All of this is configurable, by the way. The screens are entirely configurable. Your HR administrator would decide what we're going to track, whether fields are required or not with those red stars, et cetera. I bet you didn't know you were going to be a senior IT analyst, did you?
Didn't.
So the next
Like
step
the
is we're
picture,
going to propose compensation for Jack Taylor, so this will be fun. Or Jack Taylor is, going to do that. Let's see which one I'm logged in this browser. Here we go. So Jack Taylor gets a notification that says, and this could be email driven depending on how it's set up, but it says, hey, we just hired this employee for you. Now you need to put in their compensation details. And again, this is fully configurable. It brings up a wizard for Jack, and Jack says, okay, the range is 55K to 85K. I think I'm going to put him in a salary plan. And I'll just be really generous here and put you pretty close to the top of the range. And hit submit. Now we can see here that the process is complete. There's no remaining steps, or it would tell us that here. And if I toggle back over to Logan McNeil here in Chrome, if I go to the process for hire employee, you'll see here that Jack Taylor has approved this step just a minute ago, and we've created a Workday account, provisioned the account, kicked off the integration to Azure, and hopefully if we toggle over here, we should see a new employee in the console. So let's refresh the directory, and here he is. Okay, not a lot of details on Ed that were passed over, but we did pass some basic information from Workday into Azure. So Ed exists now in the directory. That's great. But let's just say that we have high hopes for Ed. We don't just want him to be an IT analyst. We want him to be a sales guy as well. So Workday supports multiple jobs. So Logan goes in and says, "All right, it's great that we've hired him." I should also mention, let's pull up Ed in Workday. Oops, I pulled up his applicant record. Let's pull up his employee record. Now he's created as an employee. Obviously, if I hired a real employee, I'd have a lot more detail that I would fill out when I hired him. But in this case, he's got some basic information. The integration that we've set up is bidirectional. So when the Azure integration fires, it creates the employee in Azure, but it also sends us back their AD ID. So this is that, you guys call it a GUID, right?
Yeah, object ID or GUID.
Object ID or GUID. So we're going to go ahead and copy this, and I'm going to hit the Graph API, which I have running over here in a REST client. And I'm just going to see, you can see here in my URL, I'm looking to see, sending across this object ID, and I want to find out what group memberships they belong to. So we're going to go ahead and just replace this guy with Ed's object ID and hit send. I get a message back, and it says that Ed is part of one AD group. So we know that the AD group that I'd provisioned for him, which was IT, is there. And he's part of one group. But let's go ahead and let's give him an additional job. So we can't just let a smart guy like Ed just do one thing. Let's utilize his skills. So I'm going to go to Ed's record here, and I'm going to go to job change, and I'm going to add a job. And I'm going to put him in the sales department. So now he's going to have two roles in the organization. And I'll make this effective yesterday, I guess. And the reason will be to fill a vacant position. I'm going to hire him into a position. And no more detail required there. The next step in this process is for Logan to review it. So we're going to go ahead and have Logan review that. Click approve. She's got one more step that she needs to do here. She is the comp administrator. So hey, Ed, this looks like a little bit of a better salary, and now you're double dipping. So that's great, right? You even get a car allowance and a cell phone allowance. That's pretty generous. So we'll go ahead and submit that. And now that should be complete. And not much happening in the integration this time, other than we're going to add them to an additional group membership. So let's go ahead and toggle over here and send this, and now you'll see. What am I doing wrong here? Edward Wu. We should see two groups. I'm getting an error. So let's go make sure I have his correct ID. Might have fat fingered something there. Oh, I'm logged in as the wrong user over there. Personal IDs. Maybe my token expired?
No, it should be.
That looks right to me. Send.
Oh, I see the API version's not in the in that authorization. Oh, sorry, in the request.
Oh, you know what? Maybe I accidentally typed something in here. So
Yeah.
let me.
We can add it though. It's really easy.
There we go. It's right there.
Yeah, there you go.
I must have deleted it by accident.
Yeah.
So now let's go ahead and send it. There we go.
Okay.
And
got
we get a
two groups.
response that shows the two groups.
Perfect.
So
Nice.
it's as simple as that. So we can set this up. The business process framework in Workday is very configurable. You can set this up so that as job changes happen in the Workday application, it'll automatically update Active Directory. Similarly, when you terminate somebody, you can automatically kick off the integration to remove their AD record or deactivate their account. The great thing about this is, when we talk to customers, they're struggling with, they typically have this email list that goes around in organizations, right? And hey, IT, go ahead, and the AD administrator has to go in and set somebody up manually into the AD groups, and then inevitably they don't know, the manager forgot or whoever requested it forgot a few things. So then then the employee on day 3 or day 4 or maybe a few weeks later has to figure out, well, I need access to X, and have to open up tickets. With Workday being the core system of record, being able to provision like this, we can automate this entire process and streamline these types of things, these higher processes. And from there, once you have them set up in AD, you can feed them to any account or any application you'd like, right? Give them access that way. Yes?
Is there a way to sort of make a call when it comes for assigning an email address? We have some tiebreaker logic for figuring out what the email address should be, because sometimes when new hires come on, there's the legal name and then there's the preferred name. So maybe the preferred first name is Kathleen, but they really want to be called Kathy. And so when we construct the email address, what we'd like to be able to do is to have when the HR people are typing in, the new hire information, be able to kind of make a call
To where your logic is?
to the logic is where we can figure out, what email addresses are available, and then make sure that they have the preferred names available.
Yep.
And then, the user could actually decide what their email address could be before we try to provision.
Yeah, so in Workday we could I'll just get it from AD if you'd like. We can also put in some rules in the application that says that because we're going to have all the email addresses anyway. So what's going to happen is if I tried to put an email address that already exists, it would tell you, this isn't allowed. We can also auto-generate, so that there's logic capabilities when we auto-generate. I mean,
absolutely.
I don't know if, in your experience, if the AD administrators are the ones that are setting up the email addresses.
Yeah, it depends. Sometimes, you can do, at least if you want to do a pre-search, you can pre-search some ambiguous name type of resolution to see if there's a Kathy or, some combination. And if there's existing ones that could show, you could at least quickly isolate the ones that are already taken, and then figure out some logic that shows, okay, those aren't available, but these are options. So you're probably right.
Yeah, we could also build into the integration a step that says, validate that this email address is okay, and if not, kick it back to the administrator that says, hey, you picked, this is unavailable. For the ones that might be in AD but aren't in Workday. But if Workday is the system of record, we should have all the email addresses in there anyway.
Right. So it's always kind of a chicken and egg problem, right?
Totally.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other part is, do you guys have a mechanism for preserving email addresses? Let's say like when maybe executives retire, right? Sam Jones is, let's say, is the CEO of the company.
Sure.
So even though he's stepping down, I don't want a new Sam Jones who comes to the company 5 years later, assuming that.
Yeah, to get CEO emails from,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
You absolutely can. So in Workday, you can set up what you want to happen with terminated workers, and particularly those types of elements. Yes, absolutely. So
Okay.
I went to University of Washington, and I still have my email address from UW. So I don't go there anymore.
All right. Hey,
All right.
Samir, are we any more? Because
No, this
we're
is-
getting to 3-minute warning, 2-minute warning here.
This is all I wanted to show you today. So
Okay,
thanks everybody
great.
for the time.
Thank you. All right, so I've got one last thing to talk about is for anybody that's planning to build an app, please tell me about it, give me feedback. If you're blocked, I want to unblock you. Let me know if you're missing anything from the API, tell me very quickly, because we're on a very fast cadence to release and update. So the more I know about what you need, the better I can get back to the team. And also I showed you that differential query real quick, but we're also planning to extend that. Think about, instead of you having to call and say, are there changes, is there a way for we to come back to us and you subscribe to some type of notification? Would that be interesting to you? So we're in that development cycle. If you're interested in something like that, talk to me. So there is my email address, and really do send me information. And if you don't want to disclose anything is going to be shared with me. I'm not, obviously don't share with anybody else. But if you even want further anonymity, then you can actually take our survey, where you can just fill in some of the questions and responses and totally remain anonymous, and put your requests in there as well. So you have 2 ways to get to hold of me and my team. And then, yeah, that's the other point. It's my team that will be developers and testers that are building this API. So lots of opportunity for us to give you what you need. So please do contact me.
Ed?
Yes.
When you're talking about notifications and sort of continuous,
Yes, yes.
Are you imagining something like an Azure message bus, feed of events?
There is. There's believe me, the gamut, the spectrum of what we're thinking about is very wide, and that's what I'm trying to do is narrow that. And our developers are thinking, oh, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this. And I said, we can't do all those things. We got to, decide what we want to do, and that's why I want to get some feedback on that. So please talk to me if you got some ideas. We have some ideas based upon some early feedback, but certainly not enough yet. So and the time is now, because we're going to start coding like in a couple
I think
weeks.
the message bus would be great.
Okay, that's great feedback. Thank you.
Proprietary about the REST interface. So if we had a REST interface in-house, like a virtual directory, we could do the same type of thing. Or?
Yeah, so the question is there anything proprietary? No, there isn't. Once this API is out there, there's going to be some small terms of use around it, but there's really only boundary cases around misuse of it or things like that nature. But it's for you to use and add value to it. Definitely, that's the whole idea. Yes. So the question is it possible to create tenants? Unfortunately, not today. The reason being is, tenants and creation usually come from authoritative sources like commerce or some other place like Azure. So right now we haven't opened that. We're also getting feedback on that. There may be some things that we can do, but right now we don't have anything that can create tenants yet. Yeah.
You had mentioned earlier a different session that goes into more information about nursing.
Yes, yes.
Do you happen to,
Yeah, it's
645?
245. I think it starts with an OU. OUC 341. It should be at, and it's at 245. And Jono, who already left, is going to be, and Ross there are going to be presenting a deep dive onto that topic and other things around the directory. You have the room? 353, room 353. What's that? The prize? Yeah. So talk to me because I would love to have more demonstrations of use cases. Samir was very kind to come here and visit and present, but I have multiple venues coming up, including TechEd 2014. So tell me about your app. Maybe I can get you on stage. So and there's other opportunities as well besides just TechEd, because they're still a year away. All right, great. Thank you so much. Please fill out your surveys and see everyone at the party.